Hello everyone. Today I will be featuring a ship that is actually quite relevant as of late because, well, because of the addition of the new black ships, we have been seeing a lot of the new Asashio blacks, which are basically identical Asashios, but we've been seeing a lot of new players wielding this ship. The matchmaking is of course quite terrible. I'm up against tier 10s, I'm up against Des Moines, Moskva and Chapayev radars, I'm up against the Shimakaze and Benson, two ships that can absolutely outgun me as well. The Kurfürst and the Bismarck both have Hydro as well, the Hindenburg and Ruin are also potential Hydro ships, so there's a lot of things working against me this game. Now I spawn up very far north, so naturally I'm going to push the objective and not only scout but also try to secure it for my team. And this is one of those fundamental things that a lot of people just go wrong. They go, well, I have 16-kilometer torps, so I don't need to push the objectives. I don't need to play like a destroyer, because I have so much range. I can go around the flank and go for torps instead. And you know who else uses that same argument? Battleship captains. They say, well, I have 25 kilometers range of my guns, so I don't need to get any closer. That's exactly how stupid that argument is. And yet we still see two different, completely different player bases we see using the very same argument, and both will criticize each other for using it, but both will still repeat that same mistake. Regardless though, I push into the cap. Note that I'm not pushing up to this island next to me. This is something of a pet peeve of mine, and that's when destroyers push into caps and then they go park behind an island. Now the problem is, if I go park behind that island, I'm not spotting anything for my team. I'm not giving them any vision. And in fact, even worse, I'm not giving myself any vision. Like for example, I wouldn't know that this Des Moines would be pushing up. I spotted him right now, and now my team can actually open fire on him. If you hide behind an island like that, you have no personal warning if a radar ship or anything is pushing down and trying to rush you. So that's why it's almost always a bad idea to just park behind some island where you can get ambushed. Instead, try to stay in the open. Note that the Des Moines radar is 10 kilometers, or well 9.9, so I'm keeping an eye out on the distance. I'm moving slightly to see, is he radaring? Are we gonna get briefly radared? He's about to reach it. Yep, we do get briefly radared. So we pop the speed boost to be able to move out of this range. We were just barely in the range, and because he's turning out because of all the damage he's taking, we are able to dodge most of the radar. I note that there's actually some very stationary battleships down here, so I instantly use the torpedo reload booster. This is something of a unique strength on the Asashio, the ability to instantly reload your torpedo tubes. And because of course Asashio's the thing that puts Asashio apart is the torps. The Moskva, who I've been asking to radar, finally does pop his radar by the looks of it, and we do get vision of the Benson. The torps I launched earlier on the Bismarck catch him off guard as he's trying to push up that flank, and since I know this guy is radared, I do pop my own smoke to try to get some damage in on him. Now this is one of those few things that have changed on the Asashio, and that is your gun power. Since they buffed all IGN guns, it also means that they buffed the Asashio guns. So even though your reload is still a pretty painful, what, 9 seconds on your main guns, you're actually much better at dealing damage to enemy destroyers now with these guns. The problem is, of course, that many Asashio players, they don't do this. They don't push into caps, gunboat other DDs, they don't contest and so forth. At this point though, I've crippled the Bismarck, the Des Moines is very low HP, and there's a Benson hiding in the smoke, so my team up here, Moskva, Roma, and Massachusetts, should easily be able to steamroll this cap. And for me to push in there right now is honestly very, very risky for a very small benefit. Whereas at the meantime, my team kind of needs some help down at B, because our destroyer died, and they have no one to spot that enemy destroyer. There's a Shimakaze somewhere there. The torps I launched earlier land perfectly on the Kurfürst, catching him off guard, and they cripple him quite hard. Note that my torpedo range is actually only 16 kilometers, and that's because I am not running the standard IGN Shimakaze build that I would normally run. I like running a slightly modified build on the Asashio, where you trade a super survivability expert for torpedo acceleration and preventive maintenance. The idea is fully focusing on the torpedo tubes. Preventive maintenance, of course, reduces the chance of your torpedo tubes being damaged, since they are your bread and butter when it comes to having an impact on the match. And torpedo acceleration gives you 5 knots of additional torpedo speed at the cost of 20% range, which in the case of the Asashio is exactly 4 kilometers. Ultimately though, I think it's more valuable to have slightly shorter range but more consistent torpedoes than those across the map very RNG torps. Ultimately though, up there in the north, they should be able to secure this camp easily. At least that's what I'm hoping. And I'm more needed down south. Not to mention, I can probably secure B quite easily for my team since they don't have any spotting. The Hindenburg asks for support, and I give him a welcome since he's also pushing B. There's no real need for him to contest it though, since I'm here. He will probably eat unnecessary damage. I did ping my team down south a fair bit, trying to get them to move north, because, well, our team isn't very useful down at A when the enemy is mostly moving their way up north as it is. Paying attention to RPF, since it's no longer switching on the Kurfürst, which means, oh, you see that? It's switching in front of me, so I need to keep an eye out for the Shimakaze popping up right in my face. That's what we're keeping an eye out. I want to scout the Shimakaze for my team, obviously, but I also need to be a bit careful with all the firepower they have available here, that I don't just stumble right into him. Wow, the replays really don't like tracking the torpedoes. That's a bit unfortunate. I think they used to be quite fine with tracking the torps, but I wonder if they changed anything. I do manage to catch the Shimakaze as I'm pushing up. I turn my guns to him, and here we get that improved IG and HE damage, and you can see that the damage you're actually able to pump out with these guns is quite impressive these days. I'm slowing down because, well, no one is shooting me yet, and this guy is the biggest threat to my team right now. So I have a smoke available as well, so I'm more than willing to trade a bit of health. I'm more than willing to trade some damage on me if it means securing the kill on the Shima. And the Shima panics because of all the incoming fire, he grounds, I hit him for a... You see those volleys? You see how massive they are? He did launch some torps my way, but of course I'm an IG, I run the acceleration mod and I pop the speed boost, so I can easily accelerate and dodge the incoming torpedoes. So that was the #1 threat to my entire lower team that was just dealt with. And that's something a lot of Asashio players do not do. Actively scout and gunboat enemy destroyers. For some reason, they use that argument that, hey, I have long-range torps, so I don't need to fulfill these basic rules, these basic jobs that apply to every other destroyer. For some reason I don't need to fulfill them. Which makes no sense considering you have 5.4 km concealment, which is amazing. It's actually god tier concealment, 5.4 km concealment, and you got 6 guns, and now you got that buffed IG and HE, which you saw how much damage. I was doing like 2 to 3k volleys on this Shimakaze. So, no, you cannot torp the other DDs. Your torps are unique in the sense that your torps can only hit battleships, but that's still no excuse for not fulfilling your basic role. If I hadn't been doing that, that guy would have been sitting there torping my entire team, pushing from the south the entire game. And same with the Benson up north, like, who would have been doing damage to him until now? And that's something people are... I think one of the reasons that the Asashio never became as strong, or it's not as strong on the servers, is simply because people misplay the ship so heavily. It's kind of like the old 20 km torpedo range Shimakaze. People don't play it as a normal destroyer. They play it as some sort of long-range torpedo sniper thingamajig that makes no sense, and obviously is going to struggle to have the same kind of impact that a normal destroyer would. And that's what I'm trying to really showcase here, is classic destroyer gameplay. You contest caps, you scout enemy DDs, you gunboat them if the situation favors you, and you spot, and of course, you torp. Whenever you can, you torp. In this case, the Musashi appears to be reversing, so we're gonna drop some torps his way. He does manage to kill our Kurfürst. Now we're gonna move more north, see if we can get into a better position, because as I mentioned before, just like with all torpedo boats, you don't want to be torping nose in. Even if you land good predictive torps, exactly where he's going to be, you're unlikely to really land more than 1 or 2 torps. In fact, the fact that I landed 2 on the Musashi when I was practically nose in was quite surprising, because it is very tricky to get those hits in. I need to be careful though, because all their radars are, as far as I know, still alive. Even the Moskva is probably alive somewhere down there. I need to be careful about the Chapayev popping up. So we're gonna play it real... This is actually very risky, because I know there's a Chapayev behind that island. And what I'm doing now is taking a very risky route, and that's putting an island on my left side. And I don't like this. I really don't like this, because if I get radar right now, I cannot dodge to the left. And the Chapayev, oh, he gets briefly spotted, and of course the Chapayev is one of those unique ships that if you get spotted in Chapayev, you can instantly radar, because your radar range far exceeds your spotting range. And because of my misposition here, because I'm so greedy to get torps off on the battleships up north, like I'm greedy to get that damage in, the Chapayev gets 2 volleys off before I can really turn away, because once again my positioning was bad. Luckily, Champayev radars last a very short time, so it's not like he's going to secure the kill on me, but it does have a pretty big impact on my health pool. On the bright side though, we do have Adrenaline Rush, since it's one of our recommended aspects of pretty much all ships in the game, because Adrenaline Rush is just overpowered. You lose half your health, you gain 10% to all DPM. Like, how is that not a fantastic perk no matter what happens, especially since you're probably going to be taking damage at some point. Now we gotta start keeping an eye out on the timers though, because what we're doing right now is we're playing close to enemy radar ships, and we're low enough at 7k health that we can't just aggressively push and do whatever we want anymore. We are easily killable at this point, so we need to start playing around it. At this point, since I know that Chapayev has used his radar, I'm obviously gonna keep calling target on him, and I'm gonna keep spotting him for my team. The more damage we can put on that Chapayev, the better for me, because I'm the guy who's spotting and he's the guy who can counter me. So if I can get my team to just focus for him, that's amazing. I'm spotting the Des Moines as well. So my spotting right now is enabling my team to deal a significant chunk of damage. In fact, if you look at the top right corner, every time anyone gets a hit on that guy, I get some additional spotting damage added in, because I'm the one granting vision for my team for these guys right now. It's gone up to 40k spotting damage. Trying to keep vision of him as long as possible. I pop my speed boost though, because he's going to pop his radar. Let's be clear, as soon as his radar is on cooldown, he's going to pop his radar. He knows exactly what's spotting him. He knows what's keeping him lit. He knows what's the reason that the enemy team can farm him. So we're gonna try to position behind this island. I'm trying to drag out the spotting on him as long as possible, but based on the timer, his radar will be up any second. And this is something you need to keep track of. I'm I'm trying to get some last glimpse of him, but I know that the radar is about to hit at any moment. We are ready. There it is, the radar, but our timing is perfect, and his radar is actually wasted because I'm already behind the island and they cannot get any hits on me. So you can spot radar ships. Don't make no mistake, you can absolutely spot and counter radar ships. You just have to play around the consumable. And that's a lot more difficult because, well, for the enemy ship it's just pop radar whenever it's on cooldown practically, whereas you have to time it quite perfectly and time your position quite perfectly. But it is possible. And the Chapayev lost pretty much all his health because of that spotting, and we even forced him to waste the radar because he was so frustrated by all that constant spotting. So do not be afraid to do it, especially if you know that they've popped that cooldown. The problem is, of course, that there's a lot more. The enemy team is significantly stronger than us. My team, because they made that strange loop-the-loop down south through A and all the way up to B, even though I got the Shimakaze kill, the Shima got a bunch of hits in, and they've kind of been farmed the entire way through. So the enemy team is actually a lot healthier than our team. They got a ton of full health ships, whereas most of my team is practically dead. We only have one battleship left, they have two. I'm gonna launch some preemptive torps, because ultimately I know that the enemy Alsace and Yamato will want to push south. I'm gonna try creating some distance though, because the Des Moines was last seen moving up here. And the Des Moines, of course, has that 9.9 km radar. We saw him use the radar earlier. We verified earlier in the game that he was running radar, so we know it's coming. I briefly spotted him. That means he's going to absolutely pop radar, and there it is. But we are already creating distance from where he was. We're sailing practically in a straight line away from him. The Des Moines was still turning, he was still behind island, so we should be able to actually outrun his radar range. That is the downside of the Des Moines or the American radar, and that's the fact that even though it lasts for a very long time, the range is quite limited. Now, I don't think I have time enough to waste to go around the entire way around this island, because, well, our team is being pushed. Our team is being pushed very hard, and I have to remain relevant for my team. I have to provide them spotting. I have to put pressure on these battleships. Because what do we have left? The Hindenburg, Alsace, and Minotaur, and they have this in massive force. I think the radar is going to last for a few more seconds. I might get briefly spotted by the Des Moines, but if our timing is correct, it is, the radar runs out, so he only spotted me briefly, he didn't even have time to shoot me. So yes, they know where I am right now, but honestly that's just gonna add to the threat of me being on this flank to those battleships, and that's gonna slow down their push even further. The Benson I shot earlier is spotted. I call target for my team just to make sure everyone notices him, and the Alsace deletes him, which is great play. So I got a Des Moines chasing me, and I think I even got the Rune chasing me as well, so that's fantastic. I pulled off two of their very strong cruisers. I pulled them off basically on a wild goose chase, chasing me around. And I popped torps on the Musashi and the Richelieu, And I use my final reload booster. I've been holding on to it till this point. The idea is that if they start slowing down to dodge, because there's a lot of ships between me and them. There's a Hindenburg that could potentially spot them normally or with Hydro. So my idea, if they spot my torps and start slowing down, they might eat the second volley that's coming from behind, because as I mentioned, I am running torpedo acceleration, which means my torps actually do 72 knots, which means they are very, very fast torpedoes and a huge threat to anyone. My first volley... wow, this replay really doesn't like apparently following the torpedoes. I apologize for this. Not really much I can do about it now, since, well, it's a replay of the game I played, but oh, nope, that didn't work. I do land one torpedo on the Asashio, which is good because it's a flooding, which will make life easier for my Hindenburg, make it easier for him to farm. And the guy behind, the Richelieu, even if my torpedoes are spotted, they are going to be very hard to dodge. Yeah, he started turning as soon as they were spotted by the Musashi, but as I mentioned, when you got that torpedo acceleration, we're talking 72 knots of torpedo speed, and even if you start turning quite early, they are very, very hard to spot. So we do get a flooding on both of them, and we force them to slow down, we force them to turn in, and we delay them. And at this point, that's what I need to do, because once again, what I'm doing here now is a lot of delaying tactics. I delayed the battleship push, and as you can see, I got a Runa Des Moines chasing me around behind me, who want me real bad. So I tell my team, don't die. At this point, they can literally just run away. I'm a bit worried about this Minotaur. He's giving them flat broadside in the open. I don't see how this will end up in any way in a good manner. And Minotaur. Now, the idea is, even though the white line predicts that the battleships would sail past the cap, at this point you gotta keep in mind that they need the capture point. So my prediction is that they will in fact not sail past it, but the battleships are going to turn into the cap. And this is something, you can't always trust the white line. You gotta go based on your own instincts at time. And in this case, I think because they need the cap to win the game, they will in fact turn in, even though the white line says they will go past. And looking at the Musashi, we can see that the Musashi is in fact doing exactly as we predicted. So this is another way of potentially increasing your chance of landing torpedoes. A very common rookie mistake is that people constantly launch the torps where the white line is predicting that the enemy would be. Oh, but the white line showed he would be here, so clearly that's where I'm supposed to be torping. No, it's not quite that simple. There are always exceptions, and this was a good example of an exception. And honestly, the more you play other classes and you know what the enemy class would do, the better. Unfortunately though, I get the classic battleship sized gap in my torpedoes, and the Musashi gets past without issues. I'm gonna lay a smoke, even though it means I'm gonna risk being radared, because I'm trying to save my Alsace. I want my Alsace to stop shooting. I'm telling him I'm smoking the Alsace, so all he needs to do is not shoot, and obviously he instantly shoots, which means that the smoke cover I just laid for him is completely useless, because when you shoot your guns, you increase your detection distance, especially even if you're behind the smoke. So if he had not shot, he would probably have survived, because my smoke was about to cut off the entire enemy vision of him, but instead he, well, it is weakened. We gotta keep that in mind. It is weakened, so people might not be paying attention. Again, the white line predicted that the Musashi would push deeper into the cap, but since they need to kill us to win the game, I instead shot the torps right behind me, since I'm expecting him to turn in to give chase, and once again, that's exactly what he's doing. Maybe this time we'll be a bit luckier with the spread. Unfortunately though, as I mentioned earlier in this commentary, you don't really want to be torping nose in, because even if you predict their moves perfectly, you're gonna be landing very few torps. The earlier prediction, 0 hits, even though the prediction was perfect. This one, only 1 hit. And that's why you usually want to go for those flanks or those broadsides. Just like with any other gun, you want to get the broadsides with the torpedoes. At this point though, we're just going to be kiting away. I'm telling my Hindenburg to stop shooting, get back. He's still shooting, and this is very dangerous when the enemy has a Musashi, because the Musashi doesn't really care about the Hindenburg armor. So I'm telling him don't die and we win, and he keeps shooting, and the Musashi blaps him down to 12k health. Now I tell him really seriously, stop shooting, and he goes Wilco. So at this point we should be able to win it. Even though he was really pushing his luck with those last few volleys. I guess he's sort of flooding on the Musashi and he wanted some permanent fires on him. Kinda understandable, but when there's 15 seconds left, I really don't feel like watching my team throw this game after all the effort we put in. We still have a smoke left, which is kind of indicative of how little I really end up using the smoke in the Asashio. Usually use it for personal saving or for teammates, but most of the time I was trying to scout as much as possible for my team, trying to give them vision. So the game ends. Our team won on points since the time ran out. 1.2 million credits, 24,000 XP, and a good 6k free XP chunk. 244,000 damage. And considering the matchmaking we were up against, I mean 15 torpedo hits, that's always good. And probably more importantly, we also have, we captured that B objective and we managed to reset that A objective earlier on. And we kind of countered their DDs, which is probably more important than the raw damage. If you look at team score, we have 2.8k base XP. Which does kind of put into perspective the amount of carry that went into this match. Especially once again, it was tier 10 matchmaking with a lot of radars and a lot of frustrating elements that, and more importantly, they really actively hunted me with those radars. Which always makes your life harder, especially in an Asashio, since they try to screen you away from the battleships and you try to work around them to get to the battleships to deal that damage. Ultimately though, a win. We only had a Kaba as our other destroyer, so pretty much when you have a Kaba as your other destroyer, pretty much all the pressure of what you need to do as a DD, scouting, capping, all that falls on your shoulders, and you can't afford to be playing some sort of flank torpedo boat when that happens. You need to be useful for your team. You can't be focusing on only your own damage. You need to be providing your team with some support as well. Detailed report. The damage upon spotting isn't ultimately that high, only 62.5k, but it was in, I would say, in pretty important moments, especially against squishy ships or alternatively against the ships like the Shimakaze. My spotting got him killed. I did do 9.5k damage to the Shimakaze myself, but more importantly, I allowed my teammates to delete him by just spotting him point blank for such a long time. Damage wise, my guns only did it 14k. Sometimes you get more gun damage. As I mentioned, with the buffed guns you can easily get more gun damage, but this game was I was so actively hunted by so many cruisers, I couldn't really afford to waste a lot of time using the guns. No real permanent floodings this game, which is unfortunate. I got 13 floodings but only 11k damage, so just a few ticks of flooding really. But the torpedo damage is of course tremendous at 217,000 raw torpedo damage, and that is the power of the Asashio. Yes, you can only torp one single type of ship, but make no mistake, well, one single relevant type of ship, which is battleships. Make no mistake, if you play it well, the ship is still an absolute monster. Luckily for all of us, the average Asashio player does not play this ship well, so he does not utilize the fantastic concealment and the quite scary broadside. More than likely, the enemy Asashio player you face will push around the flank and push into your spawn, and then he will get trapped and he will get killed, which of course makes life a lot easier for you. But the good Asashio players are, in my opinion, still an absolute nightmare in this game, because the Asashio is so specialized at one single thing, and that's killing BBs, that it's very, very difficult to counter. Anyway, let me show you guys my recommended build for this ship. Right, as usual, we shall start with the build. Consumable wise, your priorities should be always damage con premium first, followed by smoke for your personal survivability, after which point you can go for the torpedo reload booster and the engine boost. I'm sorry for the sound in the background, it's raining outside, so as I mentioned, it might be a bit distracting. I hope it doesn't come through the mic too badly. Upgrade wise, just module survival, you don't want your torp tubes being incapacitated. Engine survival, faster torpedo turret traverse, faster acceleration, mostly because you already have such a good rudder shift that you don't need to improve it further, and concealment as the final upgrade. Captain perks wise, this is a slightly specified captain. Well, first things you want is priority target, followed by last stand, followed by faster torpedo reload, followed by concealment expert. That's the 10 points. This looks very similar like a Shimakaze captain so far, or your basic IGN captain so far. After this, I would go for AR. And honestly, you really want to mix in RPF at some point, but AR and perhaps torpedo acceleration already at this point. You lose out 4 kilometers of range, but gaining that 5 knots of speed pushes these torps into the 72 knots territory, which makes them really, really terrifying because, well, especially if you launch them at any closer ranges, the targets do not have much time to react at all. Ultimately though, you do want to mix in RPF at some point, and then the last point I just have in preventive maintenance for slightly better survival of torpedo tubes, engine steering, all of this. Ultimately though, the way this differs from the Shimakaze captain build is of course that instead of torpedo acceleration and preventive maintenance, I would normally have survivability expert for extra tankiness, which is absolutely a perfectly viable build. If you don't want to make a specific Asashio captain, you just want to use your standard IGN captain, then just exchange these two, preventive maintenance and torpedo acceleration, for survivability expert, and it's your bog standard IGN destroyer captain, and it will work just fine. I personally just prefer the small additional speed boost from torpedo acceleration because, well, you shouldn't be relying on the 20 km torps to begin with, and trading some range for that additional speed is, in my opinion, well worth it. Ultimately though, that is something that I leave up to you based on how many captains you have to spare, and if you do personally consider it worth it the way I do. Flank wise, I mean, it is a destroyer, so the basic flag should always be detonations, because the destroyers are especially prone to detonations, and probably speed. These are the basic combat capable flags that you should be running. I would maybe even mix in the faster consumable reload just for the torpedo reload, smoke reload, and speed boost reload, but it's a very small benefit. On top of this, I'm mostly only running economic flags because, once again, it is a premium, so of course you get bonuses to all of these things, which makes it more valuable. The camo wise, well, I think I've shown the camo before. This is the default Asashio camo, which you got two different options of. I'm just running some... what camo am I running right now? I'm running camo that just gives me a bunch of XP and stuff. Which one you run is of course up to you. It is a premium, so it benefits more from the camos than normal ships would. Anyway, that was my brief coverage of the Asashio, since I haven't covered it since it was in a work in progress stage. Well, it was very similar to what it is now, practically identical, except for the small gun buff that we have seen to the IGN guns. But I felt like this ship needed a small update, especially since the vast majority of the player base doesn't really know how to play this ship. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you guys later.